FOGdAO is a group of builders and investors bringing you the best content on how new technologies can be used to make better games. Enjoy the show. GM friends, and welcome to the future of gaming. You're listening to our weekly FOGcast. We are recording this where I am in the morning of the 15th of November. We've got the usual crew, Collins Devin Becker, and myself, Nico Vereecke. And holy crap, what a week it has been. I go to Spain for a week, and essentially everything collapses. I'm away from my normal workstation, and everything gets screwed over. FTX collapses. Sam Bankman-Fried is an exposed fraud. He used to be the golden child of crypto, no longer. And so, question on my mind today, which I'd like to discuss with you guys, is what are the implications of all of this for the future of gaming, for Web3 gaming as a whole? A lot to talk about. Maybe let's start with some context. So, who wants to give this a go? Devin, you wanna start with like the background story here?
Yeah. I think it's kind of funny because while obviously there was a lot of shady stuff going on, this kind of started via a broadside from Binance, from CZ. I mean, there was some other stuff going around, right? Like there was some other, I think some balance sheet related stuff, some rumors and whatnot. But basically once CZ was like, we've been hearing, some smack talk essentially coming out of FTX. They didn't say FTX. I think they kind of implied FTX. And basically we're like, and then the next time was basically, okay, we're going to sell our FTT tokens and dump all that. And that pretty much just started the ball rolling and caused the bank run essentially. And so as everyone was pulling out, then liquidity problems hit. And that pretty much just tore it down from there because it turned out they didn't really have the liquidity that they were claiming to have. They had way too much stuff intermingled with Alameda research. And so because of that, it was really just kind of, it turned out kind of, I guess, what you see a lot in this space, which is basically him taking funds that were customer funds and using them to invest, which is, typical bank behavior in a way, but in a way that was shadily done and just got exposed. There's always kind of like, was CZ doing it on purpose? Hard to say. Like, he's like, oh, this is bad for everyone, blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, I think he was kind of like, one of those save face kind of things. You don't talk bad about us behind our backs to investors. I'll show you, and just basically crash their entire, topple the Jenga tower with just a couple tweets. And that's all it takes in this space if you really don't have like a solid, house of cards being built in. It's not a surprise, and I hope this is the last for a while, because after Luna and this, like, we could take a break from these huge, but I just think it's funny because like crypto was started as a response to 2008 crisis. And yet we keep having our Lehman Brothers moments with crypto. And it's like, so obviously maybe we should still avoid the centralized ones and maybe go with DEXs, maybe.
Yeah. So a bit more context here, because I think that's also relevant. So SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, young dude, curly hair. He founded Alameda Research, which was a kind of a hedge fund initially, a hedge fund trading firm. They were making lots of money, but as more professional hedge funds entered the space, they were making less and less money. That's when he decided to start his own exchange called FTX. Because FTX, like 4 years ago, it like didn't exist, maybe even, or it just started. It came up pretty fast, only pretty recently. And Alameda turned also into kind of a market maker and a liquidity provider. And so essentially what that means,
because their arbitrage system wasn't working anymore, essentially, that they made their initial money from.
Yeah. So they had to find other ways to make money. And so, there's a lot of rumors about exactly why they did what they did. Because what ended up happening was that Alameda was using funds from users on FTX. So, I put $1,000 on FTX, and FTX would say, hey, Alameda, here, I'll give you, have $500 of Nico's money and invest it so you can turn it into $1,000, and then we just made $500 profit. That was essentially what was going on. And, there was some very fishy stuff going on because Alameda was giving FTT in return for like as the reserve currency to take loans out. But FTT is the native token of FTX, which when things go bad, they go really bad because, you're taking loans out against an asset, but if that asset devalues you're supposedly, you can't take it out at that many loans, but then the risk of the exchange and the risk of that underlying asset were linked together, which is dangerous, all very illegal. And so essentially, theoretically, exchanges should have a 1-to-1 reserve, which means that if I put $1 on an exchange, they should have $1 in liquidity. And so initially, the problem was that there was a kind of liquidity problem. So there were liquidity issues. So, of the X billions, they only had maybe 70% of X liquid. So if people started withdrawing really fast, they had some liquidity problems. But that turned out to be not really the issue because they had insolvency problems, which means that it was not like they just didn't have the money. It's not that it was stuck in something in an illiquid asset. And so, there was a bank run last Sunday, I believe. And FTX got in trouble and they're insolvent. 140 different companies are insolvent, which, by the way, I saw a graph about the whole structure behind what Sam Bankman-Fried was doing. And it's like probably 3 times as complex as what the Lehman Brothers were doing with all of their
it's a hell of a shell game.
Holy shit, man. The Bahamas, if you wanna play a game of Lego with different bricks and different entities, that's where you go. Anyway, what we're going to see now and what we're seeing now is a big fallout, right? We saw some games and that's what we can get into, right? I want to dig into what this means for the blockchain gaming world. I would say immediate result is companies, projects that had their treasuries stored on FTX, of which there were a few. Star Atlas, probably the biggest one, in trouble, right? We can go into that specific case later. So that's the initial fallout. But over the next weeks and months, because I think the fallout will take long, because this Alameda lost a lot of money on the Luna story, and so I think, like, maybe directly, maybe indirectly, I don't know the details, but this might have like, if Alameda would have been making a lot of money, then I think we wouldn't have this problem, right? They were actually losing money, which led to the hole that can't be filled, the insolvency that we see today. And so I think this all is a consequence of the whole Luna debacle. And so, which means that in 6 months from now, we might still have consequences from this, which are consequences from Luna. And so this might be a long drawn out thing, unfortunately. Okay, so that was some more context. Phil, tell me, man.
Man, it's crazy. I mean, I think we can go more into the implications on gaming. I think blockchain as a whole is the obvious place to start with this, and this is a space we've all been dealing with that most people still don't trust in general, and I think that unfortunately this is just going to slow down the adoption and the trust from people that were already skeptics. It's kind of a great it's a great proof point of people that were already a little bit sitting on the fence, saying, yeah, like, see, it's stupid, and so I think a lot of people are going to point to this as validation for their skepticism, and that's naturally going to happen. I think there's no really great way to overcome that right now. Even to Devin's point earlier on, this is why people wanted decentralization at the beginning. This is also going to push regulators to want everything to be more centralized in general, because they think centralization will inevitably fix the type of behavior that we've seen across FTX and Alameda. And so, I mean, I think it is a pretty substantial headwind moving forward. Not, insurmountable, as long as other players can find a way to do this more sustainably and are hopefully acting more responsibly behind their kind of private market veil that they're able to put in front of themselves. But I mean, definitely a slowdown on the consumer adoption, and definitely a bolster for the regulators that are wanting to kind of tight fist this space.
Mm-hmm. It's funny too, because banks have to have like the 1 to 10 like ratio for their reserves, yet even a 1-to-1 can't be managed seemingly by these people, because there's no like FDIC insurance or other things to help protect against bank insolvency and stuff like that. And so if we start to move into the regulatory space, then we need to look at, okay, what works okay for banks, which is basically having some sort of backstop and, some proper auditing and things like that. Obviously, we have that question of like stable coins, right? Like, is Tether being audited and all these other sort of lack of transparency issues, which is funny because the decentralized exchanges are obviously fully transparent because they're on chain. And so it's the centralized ones where we have people doing stuff off chain and lacking that transparency that you run into problems. Because with the on chain stuff, I feel like we have so many internet detectives out there just spending all day on Reddit that, like, if there's a whiff of something, like, they'll find it quick. whether the Reddit or 4chan or whoever, like just pounces on that. And that helps keep like the decentralized stuff pretty legit. And like, obviously when there's problems, people can then also go crazy on it and break it faster. But I think this again continues to just prove why the centralized model is problematic for anything but centralized finance. And then it becomes one of those things where it's like, well, if it's going to be centralized, it probably needs to be regulated and part of like government, like infrastructure and all that crap, is unfortunately. But then we still need the decentralized stuff, and we need to stop trying to intermingle the two, because this is what happens. Is because the kind of stuff he was doing was traditional scummy finance stuff. It wasn't like some brand new Web3 thing, but it was like an extra layer of scum because he was creating money out of thin air with the FTT tokens essentially and using those to back it up. But it's not terribly different from a lot of the sneaky stuff that's happened in finance over the years because of that lack of transparency. So I think it's a pretty clear split we're going to have here. You got the regulated side that's going to be the centralized side, and you've got the decentralized side that's maybe not regulated, but fully transparent. And I think it's kind of inevitable we end up in that, where we're kind of at that fork in the road, right? Where like the number of times this can happen before people step in and change this sort of path. Like, I personally don't think it's going to be that huge of a nuclear bomb in crypto. Like for me, it's more just like sweet, like 50% off discounts on everything. Like that's how I felt when Luna crashed, right? I was like, cool, shopping spree. Like, what can I buy cheap now? I'm like, Solana's not doing great. Cool. What NFTs do I not have on Solana that I'm looking to pick up? Like, I feel a little bit bad because I'm picking them up at a discount. That doesn't help the game. But, it's an opportunity where, like, I think they were kind of overvalued before. So it's like, grab some stuff that I wouldn't have otherwise. And that's me, helping rebuild, right? By funding their recovery.
Yeah. I mean, it is the great irony, though, that, to your point, the decentralization is what could potentially protect from things like this moving forward. But I think people view things like FTX as inherently decentralized, right? Because it's crypto and it's blockchain. And so the people that are already skeptical are thinking this is decentralized.
Oh boy.
And so they're going to try to solve that problem that isn't necessarily the direct problem that's being faced right now. I do think the thing for crypto, and when we compare it to Lehman Brothers, is there's no bailout waiting for crypto because it's not really big enough for regulators to care
I'm
about.
Tired of taxpayers paying that.
Yeah. So there's that bailout's not waiting for these players. So hopefully it's kind of a wake up call for people to, act a little bit more by the book. And I mean, even if ethical because of self-interest, like that, if you fall, no one's there to pick you up. And I think that's the reality that we are now seeing. And now that the first really big domino and the first big consumer brand has kind of fallen, hopefully that's a good wake up call to even the Coinbases of the world that are, I mean, obviously public company is different reporting standards, but the other brand names, this can happen to anyone if you allow it to.
Yeah. I'm curious if it'll even touch FTX US that much, because like there's supposedly a lot of separation and a lot of stuff that won't be affected in theory, but I don't know if it'll be just a delayed reaction. But I'm really curious to see that, because like supposedly a lot was separated, and it does matter because FTX US is the one that picked up a game company, for example, the Storybook Brawl developers. And so it's like, are they going to be in a crap position because FTX US falls as well? Or is it just like, oh, maybe it's just a chance for them to kind of come out of it, unless their treasury was in FTT tokens, in which case they're screwed.
As far as I understand, I think there was a little difference between FTX and FTX US, as in there was a difference from a legal point of view, but it feels like, well, the infrastructure was similar. And so, this is something we haven't touched upon, but funds were being drained. There was like this Bahamian, like there's a lot of shit going on in the past week, right? And we'll probably see more of that. But essentially what was happening is this is really bad. So, there was a hole in FTX, as in they supposedly owed, let's say, easy numbers, they owed their customers 10 billion and they only had like 5 billion on the exchange in liquidities. It's less than that. Both numbers are lower, but that's just to do easy math. And then what happened was then suddenly people started extracting funds from the FTX cold wallets. And people were like, right? What the hell is happening? So there's potentially a hack. But what could also be happening is there was this supposedly Bahamian loophole. So in the Bahamas forces local exchanges to allow Bahamian residents to withdraw. Like FTX can't disallow withdrawals from a Bahamian resident or something like that. And so super rich people that had millions on FTX were basically bribing FTX employees to, in the database, change their nationality to Bahamian to then be able to withdraw their funds. So that was what happening. And so they were paying like $100,000 to FTX employees to do that. And then they would withdrawing. Now, a few days ago, a statement from the Bahamian regulator came out that it doesn't exist and it never told FTX to do that. So this was all, this is a shit show. And so it's going to take a while for this to work out. My point being that I think the hole that FTX had is, I think the portions are similar for FTX US. I don't think if you're on FTX US that you're safer than on FTX Global. I think you're both in trouble. I think, if I'm an investor and I have my money on FTX, I'm writing that down to zero, everything that's still on there that I couldn't get out. If I'm a personal, like if I'm an individual, I would probably don't write it down to zero because, but I think 20% may be hopeful. I don't know. Would love to get your thoughts on this, but and zero is realistic. So in trouble. And yeah, let's go into the what you said about games companies having their treasuries on FTX. So here it seems to me like there's a big difference between Web 2.5 and Web 3.0 gaming companies. So very broadly, these are generally two types of companies that I see. One is the degens who are more crypto native that are building games with crypto. And then the other one are more games natives that are using blockchain technology to do cool shit. And so in many cases, the crypto natives, they have either like a treasury that is a multi-sig or like a Gnosis wallet and that either like people can vote on, etc. And so all of that is on chain, so is decentralized and is safe, right? And so the only way that can be hacked is if the mechanisms governing the treasury are essentially abused. And I think there's a few examples we've seen around that. But a lot of the Web 2.5 gaming companies, which is, we're a games team, right? But we don't want to be in charge of our own keys, right? So we don't want to do that. We're going to trust a centralized solution for that because, why would we do this? We're games builders, right? And so, a lot of teams that are this way, notably Star Atlas, decided, well, they kept their funds on centralized exchanges, and some of them had the bad luck to have their funds on FTX, and that is pretty troublesome because, that's money gone. Star Atlas, I saw, had their runway cut from either, was it like 30 to 16 months or 16 to 8 months? I'm not sure, but it's something in that order of magnitude. I've seen other smaller teams do like, distressed raises, right? Where they're like, look, we're going to do a round, because our runway was already short, but now our runway is even shorter. And so we just need like to fund the next months, which is pretty good if you're an investor with money. Still pretty bad in general because I feel shitty. Like we don't necessarily take advantage of that, although you're helping the company, I guess. But yeah, so I think we're going to see a lot more of this in the next months. And so for me, that's the one immediate fallout from this. It is teams that were having their funds on centralized exchanges, especially specifically FTX, and potentially some of the other exchanges that might be impacted by this, because we haven't even talked about other exchanges that are now doing proof of reserves and essentially like giving each other crypto to have like good looking proof of reserves. So I think, the fallout of this might be very, very significant. Anyway, so direct consequence is games companies, specifically the Web 2.5 teams that were trusting centralized exchanges with their funds, which I kind of understand. Now, being in trouble. And I think this should be a lesson for everyone. There's this old adage in the Bitcoin world, which is not your keys, not your Bitcoin. And that is even more true today. And I think, that's another point I'd like to get into afterwards, which is we are going to need easier self-custody solutions. And I think that's probably on my top priority list for the industry as a whole to work on.
Yeah, I think Sequence Wallet is a good candidate there for having pretty good, easy to use tech. With social sign-ons and multi-sig system. Yeah,
great one. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. For investors, sarcastic. So you're shilling my bags.
No, I think Sequence is a. I mean, there's probably other good solutions as well, but that's the first one that off the top of my mind that I know is a pretty good wallet solution that like tries to solve some of the tech problems and is trying to spread to more games now, and also is one that doesn't require like, browser plugins necessarily. There is one, but it doesn't require it. Like stuff like that's pretty nice. But I mean, you're right. Like if it's too hard to manage your own stuff, then people aren't going to manage their own stuff. They're going to have someone manage their stuff. And unfortunately, I don't think there's like any situation where we make it so easy that everyone manages their own stuff. Like it's just, some people just don't want the responsibility even. And we get to a point, where we do have banks with FDIC insurance and all that kind of stuff. And there will be a future where it makes sense to go with like a centralized entity to manage your stuff for certain reasons, like regulatory reasons or insurance reasons, or, backing up your funds. But like for the average person, yeah, you probably shouldn't be just having your stuff just chill on an exchange somewhere, and kind of following that, not your keys, not your crypto kind of maxi. And there's a nice mixed future there, but we're still in the kind of the middle of all that right now, where everyone's like, got to figure that out the hard way and like figure out, like I said, that sort of 2-path thing, instead of, the maxis being like, everything's got to be this way, or the government being like, everything's got to be this way. Like, obviously we have to like have both, because like there's not a perfect solution that could accommodate both. But it does suck for game companies to like, the 2.5 ones to be like, I don't really know what to do to park this money, because this money's in crypto, because we're like selling stuff in crypto and we don't want to like cash it back out yet. And so like, it is tricky when people can do a lot of fraud things, like you were saying about the proof of reserves, where supposedly Tether even did that. Like that one time they had their big audit, like suddenly there was a bunch of money moved over into their accounts right before the audit to show it. And like these kind of shell games that I mean, even real banks play all the time. Like it's going to be problematic. And I don't know if there's a great solution outside of just harsher and harsher regulation. But I don't think, unfortunately, regulation has stopped bad behavior in banking and in finance in general. There's still tons of it. I mean, there's still plenty of Wolf of Wall Street boiler room kind of stuff that happens. There's still plenty of bank shenanigans. Wells Fargo gets caught for it all the time. It seems like just constantly doing fraudulent things, yet they're still allowed to be a bank. It happens with Deutsche Bank, I think, had some pretty shady stuff going on, and you name it. Like they're all doing something shady at some point. And so it's like, we can't really even solve that problem. It's just a matter of whether or not they collapse. But the problem is when we try and protect them, we end up with the 2008 too big to fail situation, where we just bail them out. If we decide like, Chase Morgan's too big to let them fail, we'll just bail them out and let them buy all the smaller banks that we did decide not to bail out. I'm still bitter because of Washington Mutual. I missed that bank. But it's a kind of shitty situation when it comes to not managing your own funds. And I kind of wonder if we'll even have like some sort of personalized crypto insurance where you can manage your own funds, but have a insurance plan for, if you're hacked or whatever. I doubt they could restore like a Bored Ape NFT or something, but maybe the equivalent value or something based off floor price. I don't know. But I do think that's something we need to start considering. We have other forms of property insurance, like home insurance and stuff like that. And maybe we need personalized finance insurance as a way to move away from everyone having to use centralized FDIC-backed sort of things. And of course, I'm speaking US-centric, right? Of course, like I don't know what banking system's like for you, Nico. I'm just familiar with what we do here. But it's like, if that's not truly safe either, like then we need some safety nets for the personal stuff for people, so that a game company that is just up and coming can say like, we'll manage our own stuff, but we'll pick up some personal finance insurance.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the importance of things being on chain, which is, I know, a topic Nico loves a lot, is there's a spectrum from the actual existence of transparency to the feeling of transparency. And I think a lot of regulation is there to provide a feeling of transparency and understanding what's happening. But as long as there are humans in the world, there's going to be loopholes and there's going to be bad actors. And so unless there is true full transparency, which is something interesting about being fully on chain, where every action is quite literally available to the public, those loopholes and bad actors are going to exist, and they're going to be able to kind of do their work in the dark. So yeah, like all these problems are absolutely viable today in the traditional financial markets as well. And so I think that's where it's going to be a really interesting regulatory conversation. But I do think that's where being fully on chain is most compelling. Is you can't skirt around it. Your actions are in the light, and there's nothing you can really do about it. But also the problem we have today. And one of the interesting things on the gaming side around infrastructure versus content is there is this bare bones infrastructure that needs to exist for people to go down that path of full transparency. Because, like you mentioned, like MetaMask, so unintuitive for somebody that's new to crypto, so intimidating, honestly scary to put your first money in there.
I'm comfortable with it. I'm still scared half the time when I click things. I have to double check and read them, make sure it's not a fake MetaMask, because they've gotten pretty good with the fake ones. Make sure it's not actually authorizing something I don't want it to authorize. That's a UI thing that can be improved, though.
Yeah, and so there's that foundational UI that can be improved, and who knows who will be the first player to do it. I think it can happen, and there's people out there working on it right now. But until that is not only there, but proven at critical mass to be easy enough for somebody that has never heard of crypto to come on and use it, it's just going to be a transition process, and who knows how long it's going to take. But I think
the MetaMask SDK will help with that, because you can skip a lot of the tech side of things and focus on the UI UX side of things. So I hope that gets picked up as more of a thing where people are like, hey, I don't want to work with all the inferior node communication, all this other stuff. Like, I want to let MetaMask handle that, but I want to be able to build a nice UI around it and nice improvement on the system, and then they can take advantage of that SDK. Or, like I said, alternative wallets like Sequence and ones where they've tried to solve specific tech problems. Now, that being said, I don't think Sequence necessarily solves the scam sort of situation, but it has maybe a little bit nicer UI. But we've even seen like ones with nice UIs and stuff like that get hacked, like the Phantom wallet hack, right? Like on mobile, that whole situation that happened with Solana, where it's a trusted wallet, it's like a good system. Phantom wasn't necessarily bad. No one was tricked. It was a code problem on mobile. And like even those kind of situations, it's like you could be the most up-to-date high-tech crypto person there is, and et cetera, but you get shafted by stuff like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, I don't blame people who are sitting outside of crypto looking at FTX and saying like, wow, I'm glad I'm not there. Like it's a natural reaction, like totally understandable. Like I don't think we can be like, oh, like they're just missing the point. Like I think today it is risky, right? There are risks today that can be solved and can be addressed by the people that are already building the ecosystem. But it is a major validator to the doubters. But it also at least brings back the path forward, and hopefully makes it clearer to the people that are building in terms of what action needs to be done and how you actually have to act to succeed. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think we're probably all in agreement that it is a headwind, and from an adoption standpoint. But yeah, it's not like an insurmountable defeat that FTX is going to bring everything down. But a couple other dominoes probably could. If just even 2 or 3 others followed suit at a similar scale.
Yeah. If you're like me, and you've been in crypto for a while, the smugness you feel when Bitcoin and ETH are at all-time highs, it's now the turn for all the crypto haters to feel the same smugness, right? It's a pendulum, right? It goes back and forth, and we'll be back, my friends. So everything will be good, but it might take a while, and we might feel a bit shitty for a bit. But that's part of this journey. To come back, because I want to give a little bit extra context with the whole proof of reserve situation. And so what we're seeing now is, people rightfully so are asking exchanges, centralized exchanges, for proof of reserves, which is prove that you have, if you have, let's say, $1 billion of customers' deposits, prove that you have, $1 billion of worth of crypto on chain to back that up. And so what we've seen is that, for example, crypto.com sent about $400 million worth of ETH to Gate.io. Crypto.com is an exchange, and Gate.io is also an exchange. And that was around the time that both of them were doing like their proof of reserves, and people were like, yo, what the hell is this? And then the CEO of Crypto.com casually is like, oh yeah, that was meant to be sent to a cold wallet, but we sent it by accident to a whitelisted wallet of another exchange, but we got it back, so all good. When in reality they got like $320 million worth back, so they were like missing, I don't know, a few 10,000 ETH, which is weird. We don't have an explanation for. And so essentially these proof of reserves are snapshots, which is like, oh, at this point in time, look at our balance sheet. It looks beautiful. And then so what seems to be happening is that exchanges are like sending each other funds because because it seems like they're like, oh shit, we have a hole in our balance sheet. Can you send us a few $million of ETH, please? And then they send it to each other because they're helping each other out because they're bros. And that is just like, if like I would take my money off of crypto.com or Gate.io or any of these exchanges doing these things, I think there's proof of reserves, which are snapshots. But it feels to me, I would only keep my money on a centralized exchange that has like a permanent, auditable, on-chain reserve situation going on.
It needs to not be a snapshot, basically.
Exactly. So it's just like the whole time, these are all of our wallets. You can keep track and it's all public. If a centralized exchange is not doing that, I probably avoid keeping my money on them. I guess that's my take there. Anyways, there's a lot of fishy stuff going on. Sorry?
We need better off ramps so we don't have to use exchanges to do like ACH transfers to our banks and stuff.
Off ramps?
Because what's that?
Why would you off ramp? You dude, crypto's black and
you have to. Hey, as soon as my landlord starts taking USDC, I'm golden.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
And if you're a game studio that raised $5 million, you want to make sure that with the token crashing, you don't have
that's fair.
1 million left after a year.
But I just mean like that's a big problem, right? There's on ramps that can be decentralized to some extent, like, but there's no off ramps to get stuff out, and that's where like decentralized exchanges have an advantage. And so people maybe not necessarily parking money there, but like maybe leaving money sit to be able to pull out to a bank account in the future or whatever, and kind of consider it kind of their bank account essentially. And so that's the problem, is that we don't have like a good alternative to that, and I think that kind of impedes. Because like right now I was thinking about it, I was like, why do I have any money on any kind of exchanges? Like I don't have any on crypto.com now that you're causing a bank run there, Nico. And I didn't have any on FTX, but I do have one on another exchange because that's where I was getting some money from that being paid. And it was like, it was convenient because I'd already KYC'd to be able to ACH transfer stuff out to pay rent or whatever, right? And so those kind of situations where I'm like, because like if I should transfer more of it to like my personal wallet, but at the same time I'm like, but then like I have to make sure that I might have to transfer stuff back if I need to get cash out, and we then it's like the Bitcoin ATMs and that kind of concept coming back again. And that's one problem we do need to solve, right? Like I don't want to be trying to use remittance people or something to like solve my cash flow problems because I don't want to use an exchange. And we don't need to go back to Bitcoin local stuff, right? So that I think is one kind of missing piece we have right now to allow for that sort of full transparency stuff, is to be able to have like a decentralized cash out. And I don't, thinking about it, I don't have a great solution for that, like how that could be done, but we have on ramps. So we just need off ramps too. We just need someone willing to buy crypto from us and pay us money for it.
I think a centralized exchange with on and off ramps that has a permanent auditable reserve on chain, I think is probably the closest what we can get right now.
If you can trust that that's accurate.
Yeah.
That on-chain stuff is fully accurate, because the problem is they have to do some stuff off-chain.
Yeah,
unless someone's auditing their code base. And that, the problem is like the level of stuff you have to audit is a lot of stuff that you're only going to be able to audit if they volunteer, or if like the FBI gets involved or something. Whereas on-chain, no, it's permissionless. That's the point, right? Doesn't require anyone's permission to audit it. And so like if there's parts of their business off-chain, then those are parts of their business that may be shielded or hidden. Like, the shell games we're already seeing played as it is, right? Like that was on chain, but then like people were manipulating it. And I mean, people are going to pull shady stuff no matter what you do. It's just a matter of what shady stuff you're getting them to pull because of the restrictions that you put around it. But I mean, hopefully we can avoid some more of this immediate crash, as we definitely don't need other. That's why I worry about stuff like Tether and stuff like collapsing at some point, because I don't personally trust that they have the reserves they say they do.
My next train of thought around this was that what I've seen from a lot of specifically Web 2.5 companies was, if we want to onboard the masses to Web3 gaming, we want to make onboarding as easy as a traditional free-to-play game. And for that, they're very much a non-decentralization maxi, where they're like, look, people don't want to have a wallet. People don't care about, holding their own keys and decentralization. They don't care about that. They just want to have NFTs and be able to sell them. And because of that, our solution is going to be, mostly centralized and custodial. where, either we're using a service provider that holds the private keys of our users, or we're doing it ourselves, probably even a worse idea. And so that's kind of a lot of the talk that I've been seeing, which is essentially like for user experience and making, the user onboarding easier, we're foregoing decentralization. I think what we've seen over the past week is an argument against that. And so I think, from like, I strongly feel like even more personal pushback against that line of thinking. And so the way I now look at it is that I think one of the things that we need most in the Web3 gaming space is a maybe hybrid approach to, decentralization and custody, where I think the problem that we have in the industry today is you are either fully decentralized or you're fully centralized, and, someone else has your keys. And I think what we'll see evolve over the next, months and years is a kind of, range in between, where it's more gray, where it's, for example, the Sequence wallet, right? The Sequence wallet is a smart contract wallet, which, because there's no one key pair, there's multiple keys. It makes, the user experience much better. And I think we'll see more and more of these solutions pop up. And I think, this is going to be probably like the next big unlock for the onboarding, where it's still decentralized, and, the company can still not take away at its own whim whatever NFTs or tokens you hold. You have control, but there's some kind of like, if you lose your phone, you don't lose everything, essentially. And you don't have to, like, when you're on board, write down 24 words on a piece of paper and put it in a safe somewhere. I know that account abstraction is one solution there, and I don't want to go in it too deeply because I don't understand it well enough. But that is something I'd like to have a podcast about in the future. I know one person, his name is Lord of a Few, and he's building on Starknet, and Starknet has built-in account abstraction, and that supposedly solves a shit ton of problems around, user experience and ease of use.
I think of this stuff a lot like internet infrastructure. The way we built up the internet infrastructure. Remember when it was hard to use the internet, both from the dial-up standpoint and just browsing the internet and stuff like that. And everyone kind of like built up different solutions. You had like Yahoo trying to do its way of making the internet easily more approachable. You had AOL's way, and but eventually people always used some sort of centralized gateway to get in, despite the fact that the internet is like completely decentralized in theory, right? But everyone uses these centralized mechanisms to get on, unfortunately. Even as easy as you make it, people even consider like stuff like Facebook or Twitter, like their gateway into the internet, even though like the internet's way more than these few platforms. People kind of funnel through them. And as much as we would love to say, everyone just go back to like web rings and FTPs and Gopher and all these other things that we like built out to be decentralized. Unfortunately, people trended towards the AOL style of internet because people just want to do whatever they want to do, and they don't want to hang ups from the tech. So sorry, Phil, I think I cut you off. I just want to
No, I mean, yeah, I was going to say, I think that's what's been most interesting to me about like the Web 2.5 approach is honestly just like speed of abstraction in terms of getting the blockchain elements of gaming abstracted fastest. So like build a good game, have on-chain features, but also just make it so that if I'm somebody that doesn't know anything about blockchain, I can come in, play the game, enjoy the benefits, and live happily ever after. And it seems like, there's the benefits we've talked about to being fully on-chain, fully, the Web 3.0 model. But I think it'll take a little longer for that to be done well. And that's not a problem. Like Devin's mentioned, the evolution of the internet, like this doesn't have to happen over the next 12, 18 months for it to be a success. I think that some of these Web 2.5 platforms might be a faster gateway to get users bought in. And then that can be taken to the next level with additional on-chain features and just being, more on-chain in general. But at the end of the day, I'm not a huge person on like decentralization and legacy governments and all of that and like the ethos of it all. But I do buy into better user experiences, and I think there's opportunities for blockchain to do that. And I think I'll always be a fan of whatever does that most effectively, and hopefully the sooner the better. But that's the, I guess, maybe the VC way of thinking. But yeah.
It makes me think of going back to like the internet thing, but also like games related. game multiplayer networking stuff, like the way that kind of evolved, right? Like it reminds me a lot of this kind of like techie early adopter thing. Like I remember having to set up IPX, SPX, troubleshooting stuff in Windows and like networking with like LAN cables with terminators and coax, and that evolved into like hubs and whatever, and then evolved like the null modem stuff. And like we had these different like technological leaps that made some things easier. And then at some point we got into this period where like, okay, cool, we have like Kali or these other things that like, or like GameSpy and stuff that make like finding other people's games and stuff easier, that were like semi-centralized services. But at the end of the day, like as much as we liked kind of rolling our own sort of thing, we end up kind of relying on the centralized ones where like games started going away from even having server browsers. Like we stopped letting people kind of choose how they connected to the game servers and connect to each other. And like it became automated, or even like when there is server browsers in games now, that it's still like sort of a centralized thing going through the game server that has to like process all those and go through that. And I think we kind of, unfortunately, we trend away from, and the nice thing is we still have things, right? Like you don't just completely shun the hardcore out to the wasteland. We still have like hardcore stuff, but like the masses are still going to like kind of end up in that sort of centralized area. Like they're not going to manage their own wallet, no matter how easy you make it at the end of the day, right? Like we don't keep money under our mattress. We put it in our bank account. Like same kind of thing. It's just the hardcore people will stay hardcore, which is cool. And there'll still be stuff for hardcore people. But every technology trend has shown people go towards centralization if someone makes it easy enough for them to do that way, because that's one less thing on their mind. That's one less thing to worry about. That's one less thing they have to deal with until the crashes happen. And that's, everyone gets the reality check, and that happens like every 10 years at this point in the economic world outside of games. And it's unfortunately a cycle we're not really going to escape. But I do hope that we consider like the hardcore people like us that like want to have this stuff continue to push for it to exist. Like I'm glad Linux still exists, right? Like we could have all been relegated to Mac OS and Windows, but there was enough hardcore people to be like, no, dude, Linux needs to still exist. And there's still people like, pushing Gopher and like, like news groups and other weird, like obscure internet tech still is a thing. Like I still can find BBSs occasionally that have been modernized and stuff like that, because there's still enough people around. But I think we have to do kind of like abdicate the masses to like, they're probably going to go to a centralized thing. And we need to, I guess, do what we can to like, try and help protect that from destroying all of our stuff too.
Yeah. And I think that's something interesting that Nico and I both constantly have to deal with, is like a lot of times hardcore can be synonymized with like niche in the venture world. And for us, that is most of the time not really good enough, I would say, in terms of the returns that we have to chase. And so, especially in the early stages of Web3, some of the really cool tech may be in that niche or hardcore category for the, for at least the
like
the
on-chain
foreseeable
games.
future. Yeah, for the foreseeable future. And that doesn't mean that they will stay that way, but, it's seeing around the corner of what's the actual first full-scale opportunity coming out of this. And unfortunately, like we can't necessarily just go after something because it's the cool hardcore tech that we personally find really interesting. It has to kind of take that next step, or have the opportunity to take that next step. And right now we're in a time in the market where there haven't been many players that have been able to separate themselves like that. And we've seen most of the players that have gotten to the valuations that we'd like to see them get to pull back hard because they hadn't actually achieved what the valuation implied they had. And so that's, again, something that'll constantly be balanced. And I think will be a big part of the Web 2.5 versus 3.0 argument in the VC world for the next year or two.
Oh yeah, I bet.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever we see these, busts, it always reminds me of this, or, there's a shit ton of value creation within this world. And then it seems like right now there's a ton of value destruction, as in suddenly, the global crypto market cap went down by 100 million or something. And so there's constantly this wave, and it tends to trend upward over time of value creation and value destruction. And I'm always asking myself, okay, who's making money here, right? Who just made money in this recent boom and through this bust? And it seems to me when a lot of capital flows into this, into the space, which essentially happened over the past, let's say 1.5 years, right? Over the past 1.5 years, the amount of money that either was invested into Web3 games or should be invested into Web3 games has exploded into the tens of billions, maybe even. I'm always asking myself, well, who's making money here, right? And whenever, we see a bust like this, it's not really the companies and the projects that got investments, because, their treasuries, especially if they held them in ETH or any other, like beta currency, went down in value. And so it seems to me like the ones who are profiting most from this are kind of service providers that facilitate the facilitate the money inflow for certain players. And so here I'm thinking about advisors and consultants and platforms that help with these things. And so Devin and I, the reason I'm talking about this is because Devin and I were talking before this. He's a consultant. He's doing a fantastic job. He's making some good money, and I think there's a lot of money going to consultants. Sorry, Devin, like I'm not picking you out here, but I think
like right now people haven't figured stuff out, so now's the
Exactly.
time when consultants are valuable. And then once people figure everything out, they could just copy and paste. Then they probably don't need it as much, and they just need it when stuff's not working. It's more like plumbers at that point.
Yeah, and so because there's so much hype and there's so much capital inflow, people are like, we want to do this right, and the elasticity of demand, or the price elasticity is very low, because the willingness to pay is very high, because there's enough money and there's not enough talent and knowledge. And that's why I think consultants and these kind of platforms that help you figure shit out, essentially, I think are the ones that actually like made the biggest amount of money over the past years on average.
I mean, to be fair, I'm not crying so much about a lot of these things because they're not directly affecting me as much, because what I provide, I think, is valuable and will still be valuable for a period of time. And I think, like you said, the talent pool is low enough that it's like, it's a valuable resource. You can't just be like, no, I don't need it, I'll just wing it. Like, it's a bad idea. Like, I mean, you can go for it. Like, you can, be in the heap of games that have gotten funded and then burned through all their funding and not done anything successfully. Like, cool, like, go for that. But at the end of the day, like, we're in kind of a certain phase right now, right, where people that at least understand the space well and know how to help push things forward, even if it's not like a guaranteed solution, are valuable and rarer. But at some point that phase will shift. I think, like mobile has been an interesting example that where people didn't really figure stuff out at first. Everyone was kind of like scrambling to figure out mobile, and then people kind of figured out something that worked pretty well. And then like, it became hyper competitive, and then people kind of needed consultants again to come back in and be like, okay, well, help us figure out how to outcompete our opponent now, because like the market's too competitive. So like there might be another swing back in the phase where people are like, okay, we're copying what everyone else is doing, but now that means we're competing with everyone else too, because we're copying the same solutions they are. Please help us give us a small edge over that copy and paste solution. But one thing I was thinking about too while you guys were talking that I think could be interesting for the flow of money back into games. So I have a theory that we will see Ethereum and Bitcoin and all that stuff go back up quite a lot in the near term future. And of course, this is not investment advice. I am not a financial wizard of any kind.
He doesn't know shit.
I don't know shit. Like, exactly. That's why you two are here, to outnumber me and you know my idea.
We don't know shit either.
Yes, it's true. That's why you sign the check, not get them as much. No, but basically the thing is like, we've had some pretty huge crypto bubbles before from outflow from China, from the capital outflow, trying to get around like a lot of restrictions because the way the banking system works in China with the central bank and exchanging between currencies and stuff like that. So we had this huge outflow where China was trying to basically dump all the dollars we gave them to invest and get that out instead of converting it to yuan so that they could hide it more from the government. And so they invested in, like, they were buying real estate over here, buying all kinds of industries, doing all kinds of stuff, but also like sending a lot of stuff out through crypto and creating a huge bubble there. And some of that's probably going to get cracked down on. But basically the thing is now that the president, got made, sort of semi-dictator for life or whatever you want to consider it at this point, and, has kind of renewed his lease on power. He's looking to crack down on the rich and a lot of the people with tons of money. So I expect, again, another huge capital outflow. And one of the things that seems to be okay for capital outflow is buying things, like buying game companies, buying companies and stuff like that. Funding things is one way that's like okay to send money out as a way to kind of get it out of the system so that like the government can't come after it. And so I do wonder if like we could see even like a capital outflow into games, where if you're funding a game company using crypto in a way that like makes it look legit to the Chinese government, like, oh, I'm just funding them through crypto because that's, an international payment system now. And like as a way to kind of like dodge stuff, that we could see more capital outflow from Chinese investors investing in Web3 games. Like they're already done a ton of investment in like traditional game studios. It would be interesting to see if we get another wave where maybe the VCs are like calming down on games and going to infrastructure, but maybe the Chinese are like, hey, we have all this money we need to get out of our country. Let us fund your game studio and promise ourselves a bunch of returns in crypto so that it doesn't have to come back through the Chinese banks. Just an idea.
Devin, it's actually really funny thinking about when you were talking there. Even calling it crypto moving forward is such a disservice to what these digital currencies are in a lot of ways, where crypto sounds so stealthy and complex, but when you talk about it as like an international exchange of currency or just like a digital currency,
right?
I think there's some rebranding that'll happen over time.
Ultra Forex,
mass adoption. I don't know. I can't see our future viable international currency just being called like cryptocurrency. It just
call it digital currency, right?
It seems, yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I think that's a shift we'll continue to see as well. Just like hopefully blockchain gaming. Just hopefully like blockchain gaming ceases to exist as well eventually, right? The phrase blockchain gaming at least.
That's why I like Web3. So, yeah. It sounds a little more like a progression of the existing evolutionary line instead of some new technology we're trying to shoehorn in.
And eventually, just gaming is what we all want it to be. So it's just it'll be interesting to see it evolve from just like a nomenclature standpoint.
I don't know. Free to play is still pretty heavily around as a term, despite
that sounds
fact
great,
that it's
right?
Well
it's
integrated.
Free.
Yeah, I can't wait for free to own.
Yeah,
that's why I've been pushing for like a more of a definition within the FOGDAO to like have a taxonomy of crypto games and everything, or at least maybe like a list of all of these words that are important because. One, as you say, crypto sounds fishy at this point. And also some people are like, yo, we don't do crypto, but we have NFTs. And I'm like, okay. So, or we don't do tokens but we have NFTs. And I'm like, you know what that T stands for, right? And then, so fully agree. We need more clarity around these things. We need to get rid of the word GameFi. Because it's still gives me shivers.
God.
It's just not getting better for me at this point. So yeah, 100%. And let's see what happens. I think good. I think we've talked enough about the whole SBF FTX debacle. By the way, pretty funny. I was talking to a friend of mine, and I noticed that within the same sentence we used like SBF, FTX, CZ. And then all of these, shorthands, and there were some non-crypto natives in the room, and they were like, "What the hell are you guys even talking about?" and what's that drugs that the drugs that you're talking about? So anyway,
I will say the thing around CZ was really interesting, where from a strategic standpoint, exposing FTX weaknesses. Saying you're going to acquire them, pulling out because the financials were just so ungodly bad. It was almost like a way of acquiring all of their users without paying a dime for the company, where, everyone's a lot of those users are probably going to flock to Binance in the future when they have their digital currency needs. So it was kind of a crazy mental game where like they didn't have to put $1 forward, but they got they got a lot of the effect of acquiring FTX for, whatever would have been the price.
Never trusted the accuser, though. They're almost always guilty of the same thing.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I'd be just as suspicious of Binance for being on the benefiting side of that. And for like, they didn't directly accuse, but they started it. Like, and so like, I wouldn't trust them either. Like every time I see like a politician or anyone in power, like accusing someone of something, it's almost always because they're doing it. And half the time, the person they're accusing isn't even the one doing it. It's like this weird form of projection that people just do constantly. So like now I trust Binance less than FTX almost because like, what are you doing?
Yeah, there's no way to know if that what they're doing is what Binance is doing. So that's the game I guess we're all playing. And
don't keep a whole bunch of money on Binance.
And that is the importance of transparency.
Yeah.
So
and that's why we're in this shit. Yeah, but because by the way, like a few months ago, an article came out with SBF, and he was like, I am sure that a large number of exchanges are actually secretly insolvent.
That's how he's sure.
Like, oh,
he knows how it
exactly.
Works.
So you're 100% correct. So I would say, centralized exchanges probably not the best way to store a significant chunk of your net worth.
Nope. Use the exchange part of the word. You exchange things and then get out.
Exactly. And yeah, there's a word. It's like self-custody hygiene or something. Like practice that shit. Get yourself a hardware wallet.
Create 600 wallets.
Yeah. I'm still looking for like a very, very easy solution for myself because I have a bunch of ledgers that I'm using and I don't know which one is which, and it's kind of annoying. But yeah, probably worth taking some time to figure out, at least if you're really into this space.
Just don't get into the bury gold in your backyard phase of things.
Dude, Bitcoin maxis. I just like there was this guy hating on like CZ, SBF, and Vitalik as well. And at this point, Bitcoin maxis are like the vegans of the crypto space.
Oh yeah,
They're like,
God. That's a great way to put it.
Terrible. But and so these are also, it seems like Bitcoin maxis are the guys who are like, you only need to eat meat, and they're also like the freaking deniers of the global warming and stuff. It's really weird, this tribe. And
well, they're the ones causing
like
it.
Bitcoin.
So.
Sorry?
They're the ones causing global warming, remember? There's
Yeah,
the only
exactly.
proof of work left.
Yeah, exactly. It's anyway. Good. All right, let's end this here. I think the takeaways are, if you're a games project, probably keep your money and treasury off of centralized exchanges. As an individual, the same thing. Use them for on and offboarding, practice key hygiene or whatever you want to call it. And yeah, I would say good luck, because the next months are probably going to be pretty bad. I think the overall crypto markets. I think this has lengthened the bear market that we were in by a significant amount. So yeah, it's gonna be a while until we can feel smug again. Be prepared for all of your friends that told you that crypto is a scam. To feel smug for a bit. Indulge them. They'll be wrong. They'll be proven wrong in the long term. So just build, I'd say.
Yeah, I'm expecting it to go back up sooner than people think. I think.
Don't listen to Devin.
Was that?
Don't listen to Devin.
Don't listen to me. Don't actually make financial decisions. Just watch the charts and see if it happens or not. Because I think there's a lot more like robustness to the crypto economy, despite these like the short term spikes, than people want to give it credit for, and act like every time there's a crash, everyone's going to freak out and decide crypto's not good anymore and leave. And people don't want to leave that are in crypto. That's the thing, is once they're in, people don't want to leave unless they're completely burned out of all of their money. Like these people keep, coming back to the horse track. They can't help it. So I think that robustness and continuing to expand the number of people red-pilled, as people like to put it, is just going to continue to grow it. And I think long-term prospects stay very strong, even in a near short term, because of that. I think with the macroeconomic situation is going to get significantly worse. And I don't know if people will turn to crypto right away, but I think down the road, we'll see some push into there. I mean, I don't know how much gold is a safe haven anymore these days and stuff like that. So I don't know. We'll see. Like, I don't know. Just want to throw a little last final prediction out there, because you like those wild final predictions.
That's true. Okay, good. Thanks, Devin. Thanks, Phil. This was great. And yeah, I think we'll probably have some more updates about the whole saga over the next weeks and probably months as well. Yep, listener, appreciate you listening. If you enjoyed, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, give us a thumbs up if you liked it. Same on the podcast app that you're using. And we'll speak to you in the next episode. Ciao.